Okay, I believe we're back live again here, and if so, and there's folks out there who are able to see what we're doing here, which I'm not sure that there are. Let's see. Yes, apparently we are indeed live. Okay, very good. All right, so here's where we stand with the latest on the earthquake. We had a magnitude 4.8 quake that was centered over New Jersey. I can show you a zoomed in map here in just one second. This is the big view, and you can see where the shaking has been felt not only around New Jersey, but actually we've got a Did You Feel It map from the U.S. Geological Survey team, which goes all the way basically down. Look at this. We've got reports of shaking down to Atlanta, and reports of shaking all the way up into Maine, and many of you are now seeing that too. So I welcome you if you're joining us just now, and here's what's happening for us. Basically, bottom line is this magnitude 4.8 quake was centered just outside. It was west of Elizabeth, New Jersey. I can bring in and give you a little bit closer view. Let me zoom out first so you can get your bearings. Here's New York City. All right, here's Allentown, Pennsylvania, and this is where the earthquake was centered. The magnitude 4.8 quake near Lebanon, New Jersey. For those of you interested in a little bit more specificity on what's going on around there, this is just north of Route 78 and just outside of 287. So this is the area that the quake happened. Now it's amazing that it was felt so far away, but when you consider it's a 4.8 magnitude quake, probably not that amazing after all, right? This is a pretty rare magnitude earthquake for this part of the country. We've heard from folks in New Hampshire who felt significant shaking that was going on. And certainly now what we're talking about is more folks that are reporting the shaking, as you saw, all the way up into western portions of Maine for that matter as well. Let me give you a little bit bigger context here and show you what's happening. Basically, when these earthquakes happen across the northeastern United States, there are fault zones and fault lines that are here in the Northeast. So it's not unheard of to have this happen. In fact, you might remember I'd have to go back and look. It was probably somewhere in the order of about 10 or 12 years ago. We had an earthquake that was also down in the mid-Atlantic about 7:15 on a weekday evening, and we felt that up here. We had a lot of swaying that was going on. In terms of damage, we're waiting to get reports over the area in the mid-Atlantic about any damage that may have been done there. But right now, it would appear as though we're probably looking at something that's going to end up being a number of foundations that were cracked. A lot of times when you get an earthquake of this magnitude, that's exactly what you see. You get cracked foundations. Sometimes you can certainly get some of the lesser well-made structures can have problems as well. So as a for instance, when you look at some of what's called the pager data, and this is something that, let me see if I can pull that up for us here, that the USGS puts out. There we go. We'll do a refresh to make sure it's the latest. But this is really great information because it's a very quick way, no matter where the earthquake has been globally, to be able to find out what the estimate is on economic losses and damage that was done, and also to find out if there's any estimate of fatalities given just the strength of the quake and the place that it was located. So in this particular instance, having the quake down in New Jersey, it does raise the potential for economic losses. It's a pretty kind of densely packed area, but you still have a 99% chance of less than $1 million in damage being done. A lot of this is going to be, again, to personal property, things like that. Then in terms of fatality, because you do have a very densely packed area, there is a small chance that you end up with a small number of fatalities, but the greater chance is that you end up without any. So this is, again, it's a quick and dirty kind of estimate that the USGS developed, but it works worldwide, and it's worth looking at, and it's something to take a look at if you ever see a major earthquake that breaks out. In terms of tsunami threat, there was a statement right away from the Tsunami Warning Center. We'll refresh and make sure nothing new, but there shouldn't be now. And this was a very brief statement that came out from the Tsunami Warning Center, essentially saying there's been the earthquake. It's been a magnitude 4.8 quake, but at this point, there doesn't appear to be any likelihood that there was any tsunami. And it makes sense, right? Because if you think about it, we had the earthquake over land, and really tsunamis are caused when you have earthquakes that for which an epicenter was under the water, and that causes a shift in the ocean shelf, and that can result in your tsunami development. So you wouldn't expect that you'd necessarily be getting anything like that out of this particular one. So again, if you're just kind of tuning in to see what's going on, magnitude 4.8 quake that was located just outside of Lebanon, New Jersey. Let's see, do have reports that have come in out of Allentown, Pennsylvania. Dan was on the 7th floor, courtroom for jury duty, chandeliers swaying a bit, Heavy shaking, no damage immediately seen. Had a report that came in on the YouTube chat a short time ago out of New York City when we were up last time, and certainly was felt throughout New York City for that matter as well. Let's see, heard out of New Hampshire, Central and Southwest New Hampshire both. Chris in Wolfboro, David in Swansea, New Hampshire, both reporting that they could feel the shaking that was happening. According to David in Swansea, he says it had a bunch of rumbling and everything shook. Let's see, hearing from Richard, who is in New York City, and just says basically the earthquake was very detectable through the Big Apple, as you would expect that it would be. But here in New England, that's been the case for us as well. We could show you again a little bit of the Did You Feel It map. I'll go ahead and give a refresh on this as well so we get a little bit better idea. And you can see a lot of folks feeling the shaking all the way through Springfield, through Boston, running up through the New Hampshire seacoast as well, and then all the way up to Burlington, Vermont, and even across the Canadian border, down to the south for that matter, headed down through the mid-Atlantic. And again, I mentioned earlier down to Atlanta. Now, look at this. You've got felt reports that come in as far away as Miami out of this one. So this one traveled up and down the I-95 corridor. It made pretty good progress. And a lot of times we kind of expect that to be the case. You've got bedrock that's in and around the New Jersey area that carries the vibration pretty well. When it gets up this way, you get an increased amount of granite that can continue to carry the vibration through. So the way that the kind of the ground is set up in the Northeast, it's about what you would expect to see. Zozo one up on the chat on YouTube on the live stream here. Thank you very much. Albany, New York, very small, about 20 seconds or so. Travis E17 felt it up Northwest Mass for about 10 to 12 seconds, was upstairs, and the whole room started to shake. Lauren B., the shaking was loud in Monmouth County, New Jersey. So thanks for checking in from across the Northeast. Appreciate you kind of letting me know what's going on so that I can kind of relay that as well. So again, if you're kind of just checking in, 4.8 magnitude quake. Unheard of? No. Rare? Absolutely. Yes, this is a rare quake for the northeastern United States, and we do get them from time to time. The biggest concern I would have with a quake like this is that you're going to end up with foundation cracks, and I think we're going to end up hearing of a lot of foundation cracks that occurred anywhere near and around that epicenter. So the green area would be the area that you'd be most likely to find that, but then also you'd see it too when you get into some of these areas that are in the blue. These would be other areas you'd be concerned about possible foundation cracks. So that's a pretty good area of New Jersey, right? I mean, from Trenton all the way to Allentown, basically up to the Big Apple and up into northern Jersey for that matter as well, with your greatest concern obviously found very close to the epicenter. Weak shaking, light, moderate, strong shaking. How many each got each of that? Well, obviously right near the epicenter is where you had your moderate to strong shaking. About 7,000 folks feeling strong shaking, 242,000 feeling the moderate shake, and then you had a much larger number that have fit into the weak shaking, and that's what we looked at just a short time ago. Which is that feels like map where you could feel that all the way back up across into southern Maine and all the way down to Washington, D.C. for that matter as well. So again, I mentioned earlier that there are definitely some fault lines that we have here in the Northeast. And so this is not necessarily something that's unheard of or new for us. It's just something that really is very rare for us as well, right? And let's see if we can view nearby seismicity and see if there's anything. Yeah, there's been nothing recent that kind of shows up here. In terms of some of the fault lines that run near us, let's see, hearing from Aaron. Thanks, Aaron, who says that we've got the Norumbega fault in Mass, the Clinton-Newbury fault zone in Cameron's line. So shout out to Aaron Perry for chiming in with some of the active fault lines that we have here in the Northeast, which have a history of major quakes going back hundreds of years, just not necessarily ones that happen very often, right? And so that's where things for us kind of take on a different approach, is when we actually feel these things, they're ones you remember. And that's why we can look back 10 or 12 years and say, I remember that last one that we got. And then we can look now and say, okay, and we've got these new ones that have been occurring as well. Let's see. All right. Aaron sends along the link. You know what? We'll pull it up real time. I appreciate that. earthathome.org. We kind of discover this stuff together on this live stream. So it's for those of you that are here, we're going through it in real time, taking a little bit more of the scientific approach. Cool. Thanks, Aaron. There it is. All right. Donate. We'll donate another time, but let's take a look. Okay. Yep. So here are your fault zones, right? And so you can see, yep, some of it occurring right along the edge of one of those fault lines. It runs all the way back up into Albany for that matter as well. Kind of neat to be able to see it in that kind of regard. So thank you very much for that, Aaron. I love that. That's a cool link right there. All right, back to what's going on with the actual quake itself. Let's see if we can get zoomed in on the interactive map. There we go. There we are. Oh, interesting. So there's Tewksbury Township, and I told you that this is here's Lebanon on the lower left of the screen. So out by Old Wick, New Jersey, is where this epicenter was. Kind of amazing too. That what happens is, I can show you. This was the Weston seismograph of the Weston Observatory. This is run by Boston College, but nonetheless, this really obviously was very, very clear, and you can see it showing up across the entirety of the spectrum here. So this was again out of Weston. There are other seismograms that are across the remainder of New England. This one is out of Vermont at the Crossett Brook School. This also showing it really, really clearly. And, this is a great site. This is the Weston Observatory site, but basically you can go, some of them are going to be down. This one was up too. This is out of Westport, Connecticut. So even closer to the epicenter, right? And seeing that really strong signature that showed up here right at the time of the earthquake, which is about 24 minutes past the hour, 23 minutes past the hour, somewhere thereabouts. So you're able to record this both scientifically, and of course you didn't need the scientific part of that to show you that you had the earthquake. But getting back into a little bit more interactive map, you can see again a little bit closer inspection of where that 4.8 magnitude quake was. And that was in just north of Route 78. So if you're familiar with New Jersey, outside of 287 along 78, just outside of Lebanon, is where that quake took place. Let's see, nothing new in the chat that's come in from you guys. So thanks everybody who's at least kind of launched in here with a little bit of feedback on what you've been seeing and feeling. Appreciate that. Let's see if there's anything new that's coming out of some of the media organizations that are down in the Mid-Atlantic. Yeah, this is cute. The Philadelphia Police Department putting out a tweet saying that they're aware of multiple reports of seismic activity. Unless you're reporting an emergency, please don't call 911. That's good advice. They have suspended some of their light rail service down in the Philadelphia area and in the New Jersey area due to the need for track inspections. You would expect that likely to be the case for us as well. Let's see. We have anything else that's new and interesting that's coming in? Let's see. This is kind of that stage where you wait and you see what you can get in terms of any reports that come in and see whether or not there's anything interesting with regard to damage. But again, kind of the expectation at this point is you're probably going to find that the damage is going to be confined to things like cracked foundations. You may end up hearing that some kind of older, compromised structures that are down around the epicenter may have more significant damage. There's a possibility of that, but at the same time, typically that's not what you're going to find outside of the immediate epicenter zone. Let's see, USGS saying earthquakes uncommon but not unheard of along the Atlantic coast. We've talked about that, right? Interesting. They had one study that they call it a passive-aggressive margin because there's no active plate boundary between the Atlantic and North American plates, but there are stresses. That's an interesting one. So basically what they're saying there is essentially you've got nothing that's regularly active like what you would have out in California. You don't get these regular earthquakes that happen, but you still have a very vulnerable zone that's set up. There's the street view now. You can actually zoom right in. This is kind of, I was getting at this earlier. This is what I find kind of amazing, is the fact that you can take all of these seismograms from across the Northeast, and basically by putting all the data together, and this is what the USGS does, you can actually get down almost to the street level to find out where the epicenter was located. So if I zoom out a little bit more, because these streets, if you're watching from New England, probably don't mean a whole lot to you. It's one thing to say, okay, Hillendale Road, which would be amazing if you lived around there to know what's right under you, right? But nonetheless, we're talking about Tewksbury Township and Old Wick in New Jersey, two areas. And again, this is just north of Route 78. There's the Round Valley Reservoir, which if you're familiar with that area, that's actually a pretty big kind of thing that folks know about. The Somerset Airport located a very small distance outside. And it's funny, we looked just a few moments ago at some of the active seismic zones in the fault lines that run in through New Jersey. It's interesting that some of this runs right along some of the hills. So there's the Fox Hill Range, right, Schooley's Mountain, and this is right along that same area that is that active fault line, or that fault line. I guess it's not that active, but today it is. Duxbury, Mass. Tom Pucci saying felt the shaking with an audible rumble. Tom, thanks for the report there. And again, for a lot of folks, we can go back to that that feels like map. Let's see, there it is. Let's go ahead and refresh it. We'll get the latest view. But for a lot of folks, this is one that we felt all the way up. Look at that, into northern New England, central and northern Vermont, right? So now we've got 2 feet of fresh snow on the ground, and you're feeling the rumbling on top of that. And this was the case. It's funny, too, how you get more. If you look, there's definitely more northward displacement to what was going on with the shaking than there is southward displacement, right? I mean, you felt it down in D.C. And after that, sure, it's kind of amazing to see how many folks say they could feel it out in Chicago and all the way down in Miami. Whether or not that's accurate or not, it's hard to say. Sometimes folks see this and decide they're going to report in that they felt it anyway. Sometimes they really did, and sometimes there's a truck going by and they wanted to take part in feeling it. But I think what's interesting is here in New England, we definitely have really more of the kind of felt shaking reports than you get down to the south. And this makes sense because not only do you have kind of the bedrock that's laid out across Jersey, and then when you get up into New England, you've got the granite that's laid out underneath us here. And I think that helps to carry it this way. We saw the same thing with that mid-Atlantic quake that we had, about 10, 12 years ago, right? That was located down in the mid-Atlantic farther to the south, but we felt that up here in New England even more than we saw it getting carried down to the south. Meredith Warren says felt it in Bradford on the 3rd floor of an old office building. So Meredith, thanks for chiming in on chat with that. Let's see, also had a report from Dan out of Allentown, New Jersey on the 7th floor. Courtroom for jury duty. The chandeliers swayed, heavy shaking, no damage immediately seen from it as it happened. But obviously, this is an event that's going to be one that'll be remembered by a lot of folks up in New England, and it's one that I think we're still kind of, the jury's still out on to see just how much damage, if any, was done. I mean, there has to be, I would think, some amount of damage that we're going to start hearing back from when you get around New Jersey, because you just don't get a 4.8 quake without at least significantly cracked foundations, things along of that nature. I'm sure we're going to start to see before long. You'll start to get the video coming in of things knocked off shelves at convenience stores, things of that nature. We always see that when you get a quake of this magnitude that'll come back. Again, if you're just kind of tuning in, great to have you here. I can show you the Weston Observatory. This is Westport, Connecticut, but let me swing you over to Weston. The Weston Observatory in Massachusetts, run by Boston College, picking up on a huge shaking at about 23 past the hour. Really clear there. The Tsunami Warning Center immediately issuing a statement saying that there would be no tsunami, right? Because this thing was located over land. The epicenter was over land. It was not out over the water. So that makes a big difference. And that's important when you have them that happen out over the water. That becomes more of a concern. So at this point, I think that's what we have for information. I think now it's just going to become one of these things where we'll wait and see what comes back in terms of reports, in terms of any damage reports, etc. 2011. Okay, 2011 was that Mid-Atlantic quake that I was referring to. So that was the one that we felt here in New England that was out of the Mid-Atlantic. That was back 2011. So 13 years ago, right? And that one was bigger. That one was almost a 6. So we've been there before. I think it was a 5.8. But nonetheless, so I guess that's where we stand for now. Unless you guys have anything further on the chat, I'll let you go, and we'll see what comes of this. But that's about all the scientific information right now. There's been no real developments out of that. So thanks for checking in, and take care.